The formal dinner took place in the station's grand hall on the third evening. Massive windows showed the blue world spinning below while Zaphirian warships moved like predators through the darkness. Ambassador Carter sat across from Emperor Vextar at a long table, made from some kind of black metal. The past 2 days had been difficult but productive. Carter had presented humanity's gifts with careful ceremony. Paintings by Earth's greatest artists, music that captured the beauty of human emotion, and books containing humanity's greatest philosophical works. The Emperor had examined each gift with what seemed like growing contempt. Lisa Morgan sat to Carter's left, her cultural knowledge helping to navigate the complex Zaphirian customs. She had noticed that the Emperor's crystals rarely showed the green of genuine interest. Mostly they flickered between orange skepticism and red irritation. She worried that their peaceful approach was being seen as weakness. Kevin Walsh had worked tirelessly to ensure perfect translation. The Zaphirian language had subtle meanings that could change based on tone and context. He had caught several potentially dangerous misunderstandings and corrected them quickly. But he sensed growing tension in the room despite his efforts. Jake Peterson stood near the wall, officially unarmed but alert to every detail. The Zaphirian guards watched him with amusement. They whispered among themselves about the human security officer who carried no weapons. Some bet on how quickly they could kill him if ordered. The dinner itself was a strange affair. Zaphirian food was heavily spiced and included several kinds of meat from conquered worlds. They seemed to take pleasure in describing how each animal had been hunted to extinction. Carter ate politely and complimented the flavors while hiding his disgust. Emperor Vextar dominated the conversation, telling stories of his military victories. He described planets burned and populations enslaved. His officers laughed and cheered at the bloodiest details. Carter listened with diplomatic calm, occasionally asking questions that steered the discussion toward more peaceful topics. The breakthrough came when Carter began discussing trade possibilities. Earth's agricultural worlds could provide food that would feed billions of Zaphirians. Human medical technology could extend their lifespans and improve their health. Manufacturing techniques could increase their industrial capacity without depleting resources. For the first time, the Emperor's crystals showed genuine green interest. He leaned forward and asked detailed questions about human production capabilities. Carter answered honestly, describing Earth's vast agricultural domes and automated factories. He painted a picture of prosperity through cooperation instead of conquest. Lisa felt hope rising in her chest. This was how diplomacy worked. You found common ground and built from there. The Emperor was beginning to see the benefits of peaceful trade over costly warfare. She made careful notes about which topics had captured his attention. Kevin noticed that the Zaphirian officers were becoming restless. Their crystals showed deep red anger as their Emperor considered peaceful alternatives to expansion. They had built their careers on military conquest and feared losing their positions in a peaceful empire. Jake observed the changing mood among the guards. They no longer seemed amused by the weaponless humans. Instead, they appeared worried that their Emperor might actually agree to some kind of peace treaty. Their hands moved closer to their weapons as the discussion continued. The Emperor asked about Earth's military capabilities. Carter answered with diplomatic honesty. Humanity maintained defense forces but had not fought a major war in over 2 centuries. Their ships were designed for exploration and trade, not conquest. Their soldiers were peacekeepers, not warriors. This information seemed to fascinate Vextar. He asked follow-up questions about human military technology and tactics. Carter explained that humanity had chosen to invest in diplomacy rather than weapons. They believed that peaceful cooperation was more profitable than endless warfare. The Emperor's crystals began to pulse with an odd mixture of colors. Green interest warred with red anger and orange suspicion. Lisa recognized the pattern from her studies. It indicated deep internal conflict in a Zaphirian mind. She hoped he was wrestling with the decision to choose peace. But the Emperor's next words shattered that hope. He stood suddenly, his 4 hands moving to the ceremonial swords at his belt. His crystals blazed pure red as he spoke in a voice filled with contempt. You offer us the way of cowards and weaklings. You speak of trade and cooperation while your species grows soft and pathetic. You have forgotten the glory of conquest and the strength that comes from dominating your enemies. Carter remained seated, his hands visible and empty. He spoke in calm, measured tones despite the obvious danger. Your Majesty, there is great strength in choosing peace over war. It takes courage to build rather than destroy. The Emperor drew one of his ceremonial blades. The metal gleamed under the chamber's lights as he pointed it at Carter's chest. His guards stepped forward, their own weapons now openly displayed. The dinner had become an execution. You dare to speak of courage while sitting defenseless before me. You come to my domain with gifts instead of armies. You offer trade instead of tribute. Your very presence insults the warrior spirit of the Zaphirian people. Lisa started to stand, but Jake placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Any sudden movement could trigger violence. Kevin's fingers hovered over his communication device, ready to send a warning back to Earth. But they all knew it would be too late. Carter looked directly into the Emperor's yellow eyes. He showed no fear, only sadness. Your Majesty, we came here in good faith hoping to build friendship between our peoples. Violence will only bring suffering to both our species. The Emperor's crystals pulsed brighter red. His officers cheered him on, their own crystals showing bloodthirsty excitement. They had grown tired of talk and wanted action. The prospect of human blood excited their warrior instincts. Friendship is for equals. Humans are clearly inferior beings who deserve only conquest or death. Your weakness disgusts me, and I will not pollute my empire with your cowardly philosophy. Without another word, Emperor Vextar drove the ceremonial blade deep into Carter's chest. The ambassador's eyes widened in shock and pain as blood began to flow from the wound. He tried to speak, but only blood came from his mouth. Lisa screamed and rushed to Carter's side as he collapsed to the floor. Kevin triggered the emergency beacon while Jake moved to protect them both, despite having no weapons. The Zaphirian guards laughed at their distress, finding the human's emotional reaction highly amusing. Carter's blood pooled on the black metal floor as his life ebbed away. His eyes found Lisa's face and he tried to smile. With his last breath, he whispered words that Kevin barely heard and would never forget. Tell them we tried. Emperor Vextar cleaned his blade with casual indifference. He looked down at Carter's body with satisfaction before addressing his officers. Send word to the fleet. We will claim human space by force and show the galaxy what happens to species too weak to defend themselves. The remaining humans were dragged away to the station's prison cells. Lisa wept for her fallen leader while Kevin activated a hidden recording device that had captured everything. Jake helped them both, his mind already planning their escape and revenge. But none of them knew that Carter had been more than just a diplomat. Far away on Earth, his sister Admiral Rebecca Carter would soon learn of his death, and somewhere near Proxima Centauri, General Alex Stone would discover that his beloved mentor had been murdered by aliens who mistook peace for weakness. The Emperor had just made the greatest mistake in Zaphirian history. The quantum communication relay reached Earth in less than 4 hours. Kevin Walsh's hidden recording device had transmitted everything before the Zaphirians found and destroyed it. The footage of Ambassador Carter's murder spread through human space like wildfire. Admiral Rebecca Carter sat in her office at Earth Defense Command when the priority message arrived. She was Daniel's older sister by 6 years and had chosen the military path while he chose diplomacy. They had argued about their different approaches to alien relations but loved each other deeply. The recording started with the dinner conversation. Rebecca watched her brother speak calmly about trade and cooperation while surrounded by armed aliens. She felt proud of his courage and sad about his naive faith in peaceful solutions. Then she watched Emperor Vextar draw his blade. When the sword pierced Daniel's chest, Rebecca's coffee cup shattered against the wall. She stood frozen as her brother died on the screen, his blood spreading across the alien floor. Her hands shook with rage as the Zaphirians laughed at his death. Something fundamental broke inside her heart. She activated the emergency communication system and contacted General Alex Stone at Proxima Centauri. Stone commanded the 7th Strike Fleet, humanity's most elite military force. He had served under Rebecca early in his career and considered Daniel Carter his mentor and father figure. Stone was reviewing training reports when the call came through. He smiled when he saw Rebecca's face on the screen, until he noticed her expression. She looked like someone had torn out her soul and set it on fire. Without saying a word, she transmitted the recording. Stone watched in silence as his mentor was murdered. Daniel had recruited Stone into the diplomatic corps 20 years ago, and taught him that words were more powerful than weapons. Stone had later switched to military service but never forgot those lessons. Now he watched those same words fail utterly. When the recording ended, Stone's face had changed completely. The compassionate diplomat Daniel had trained was gone. In his place sat a military commander whose eyes burned with cold fury. He spoke in a voice Rebecca barely recognized. "How long do I have?" 6 hours until the president authorizes military action. Director Brooks from the Diplomatic Corps is requesting immediate intervention. This is the first time in a century that diplomats have asked for war. Stone nodded and began activating emergency protocols. The 7th Strike Fleet would need massive reinforcement for what he was planning. He contacted fleet commanders across human space and used authorization codes that had not been activated in over 200 years. Meanwhile, the recording of Carter's death continued spreading through human communication networks. Citizens who had lived their entire lives in peace watched their diplomat murdered in cold blood. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. On Mars, the massive shipyards that built peaceful exploration vessels began converting to military production. Workers who had never seen weapons started assembling missile launchers and energy cannons. The Red Planet's factories worked around the clock to arm humanity for war. The agricultural worlds of the outer colonies started converting their transport ships into support vessels. Massive grain haulers became troop transports. Luxury passenger liners were fitted with medical facilities for wounded soldiers. Every ship that could carry humans or supplies was pressed into service. Most ominously, sealed facilities on Luna began opening for the first time in centuries. These underground bunkers contained weapons and technologies that humanity had banned by treaty after the colonial wars. They were tools of such devastating power that previous generations had sworn never to use them again. Director Helen Brooks of the Diplomatic Corps made an unprecedented statement to the Galactic Council. Her voice trembled with controlled rage as she announced that humanity was withdrawing from all peace treaties. Diplomatic immunity was suspended for any species that threatened human envoys. President Robert Hayes addressed the nation 6 hours after receiving the recording. He stood before cameras with Admiral Carter and General Stone flanking him. His words were simple and final. Ambassador Daniel Carter went to the Zaphirian Empire in peace. He offered friendship, trade, and cooperation. He was murdered while eating dinner and discussing agricultural exports. This act of barbarism will not stand. I am authorizing Operation Retribution under the joint command of Admiral Carter and General Stone. They have my full authority to use any means necessary to rescue our surviving diplomats and respond to this unprovoked act of war. To any species watching this broadcast, know that humanity remains committed to peace, but we will no longer tolerate attacks on our peaceful envoys. The choice between diplomacy and destruction now rests with you. Stone's 7th Strike Fleet began assembling at the edge of human space. Ships that had been mothballed for decades emerged from storage facilities. Crews that had trained for wars they never expected to fight reported for duty with grim determination. The fleet grew from 12 ships to over 300 in less than 48 hours. Battleships that had been converted to research vessels were hastily rearmed. Civilian ships volunteered to serve as supply convoys. Even luxury yachts offered to carry messages or wounded personnel. Admiral Carter coordinated the largest military mobilization in human history. She worked without sleep, driven by grief and fury. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was dedicated to making the Zaphirians pay for her brother's death. General Stone personally selected the crew for his flagship. The ship had been a peaceful exploration vessel called Discovery. Now it was renamed Vengeance and fitted with weapons that violated several galactic treaties. Stone did not care about treaties anymore. Captain Ryan Mitchell, Stone's former student, volunteered to lead the Special Forces team that would rescue the surviving diplomats. Mitchell had trained under both Stone and Daniel Carter. He combined military efficiency with diplomatic principles in a way that made him perfect for the mission. Meanwhile, in Zaphirian space, Emperor Vex-Tar celebrated his victory. He broadcast images of Carter's death to show other species what happened to those who opposed the Empire. His military commanders prepared invasion fleets to claim human territory. The Zaphirians had no idea what they had awakened. They saw humanity's peaceful nature as weakness rather than choice. They did not understand that a species capable of building paradise could also unleash hell. Intelligence reports from human space confused Zaphirian analysts. They observed massive fleet movements but could not believe the scale of the response. Surely the humans would not risk total war over one dead diplomat. They prepared for a limited conflict against a peaceful enemy. Emperor Vex-Tar received reports of human military activity with amusement. He told his officers that scared humans were gathering their pathetic defense forces. The Empire would crush them easily and enslave the survivors. But deep in classified Zaphirian files, older intelligence officers found disturbing information about human history. Records of the colonial wars showed a species capable of terrifying violence when provoked. These reports were dismissed as propaganda by younger officers who had only seen humanity's peaceful facade. The stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. On one side stood an empire built on conquest and military might. On the other side stood a peaceful species that had just remembered how to make war. General Stone stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as his fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. He looked at the picture of Daniel Carter on his command console and made a promise to his dead mentor. "You taught me that words were stronger than weapons. But when words fail, weapons must speak. I will make them understand the mistake they made." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace carrying death toward the Zaphirian Empire. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Zaphirian territory like a swarm of angry hornets. General Stone's armada had grown to over 400 ships during the journey as more vessels joined from neighboring systems. The sight of so many human warships would have been impossible just days ago. Stone stood on the bridge of the Vengeance studying tactical displays. The Zaphirian border defenses looked impressive on paper. Orbital weapons platforms, minefields, and patrol fleets protected their territory. But Stone saw weaknesses everywhere. The aliens had never faced an enemy that understood both war and technology. Admiral Carter commanded the fleet from her flagship Retribution. She coordinated with Stone to plan their assault strategy. They would not simply defeat the Zaphirians. They would demonstrate the terrible cost of harming human diplomats. Every alien species in the galaxy would learn from what happened here. Captain Mitchell prepared his Special Forces team for the rescue mission. Intelligence suggested that Lisa, Morgan, Kevin Walsh, and Jake Peterson were being held on the Zaphirian capital world. Mitchell's team would extract them while the main fleet engaged enemy forces. The first Zaphirian patrol encountered the human fleet near the outer planets. A squadron of 12 warships moved to intercept what they assumed was a small scouting force. Their sensors could not properly count the human vessels due to advanced stealth technology. Commander Zekthar led the patrol from his heavy cruiser. He was confident that his squadron could destroy any human force. The Empire's intelligence. Reports claimed that humans were weak pacifists with inferior technology. He expected an easy victory to add to his collection. Stone watched the patrol approach and smiled coldly. He gave the order for the first demonstration of human military capability. The battleship Thunder opened fire with weapons that had been banned for 2 centuries. Energy beams tore through space at nearly light speed. The Zaphirian squadron ceased to exist in less than 30 seconds. Their shields failed instantly against human firepower. Their hulls vaporized before they could return fire. Only expanding. Clouds of plasma marked where proud warships had been moments before. The destruction was so complete that nearby Zaphirian sensors could not determine what had happened. One moment they tracked 12 friendly ships. The next moment showed only empty space and radiation signatures. Fear began to spread through their command networks. Stone broadcast a message on all Zaphirian frequencies. His voice was calm and emotionless as he delivered humanity's ultimatum. Emperor Vextar had 72 hours to surrender unconditionally and return the surviving human diplomats. Failure to comply would result in the complete destruction of the Zaphirian Empire. The message reached Emperor Vextar in his palace on the capital world. He laughed at what he considered human arrogance and ordered his military to crush the invaders. His generals assured him that their forces vastly outnumbered the humans. Victory was inevitable, but reports from the border told a different story. Human ships moved through Zaphirian space like ghosts, appearing without warning to destroy military installations. Their weapons were impossibly powerful, and their defenses seemed impenetrable. Entire star systems went silent as human forces advanced. Stone's strategy was methodical and terrifying. He did not want quick victory. He wanted the Zaphirians to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Human forces targeted only military assets but destroyed them with surgical precision. Planetary defense networks that took decades to build were reduced to scrap in minutes. The Zaphirian High Command tried to organize a coordinated response. They assembled their largest battle fleet at the fortress world of Kextara. Over 600 warships gathered to make a final stand against the human invasion. Their commanders were confident that superior numbers would ensure victory. Admiral Carter's fleet arrived at Kextara to find the enemy formation waiting. The Zaphirian ships were arranged in classic battle formations that had won countless victories against other species. Their energy shields glowed with power as they prepared to unleash devastating firepower. Stone studied the enemy formation and recognized their tactical doctrine. They relied on overwhelming firepower and aggressive assault tactics. Against most enemies, this approach would be effective. Against humans who had spent centuries perfecting defensive technology, it was suicide. The battle began when the Zaphirian admiral ordered a full assault. 600 warships charged toward the human fleet while firing everything they had. Energy beams and missiles filled space between the opposing forces. It looked like the beginning of a glorious victory. Then human defensive systems activated. Point defense lasers destroyed incoming missiles with perfect accuracy. Energy shields deflected beam weapons harmlessly into space. The massive Zaphirian assault had no effect whatsoever on the human fleet. Stone's counterattack was swift and devastating. Human ships used weapons technology that the galaxy had never seen. Gravitational cannons crushed enemy vessels like tin cans. Plasma torpedoes burned through armor as if it were paper. Quantum disruptors simply erased matter from existence. The proud Zaphirian fleet lasted less than an hour. Their advanced warships became floating debris while human vessels remained completely undamaged. The fortress world's defenses fell within minutes of the fleet's destruction. 6 centuries of military tradition died in that single battle. News of the defeat reached Emperor Vextar as human forces landed on his capital world. Captain Mitchell's Special Forces team had successfully infiltrated the prison complex and rescued the surviving diplomats. Lisa Morgan was traumatized but alive. Kevin Walsh had recorded everything he had seen. Jake Peterson was ready to testify about Zaphirian war crimes. Vextar finally understood the mistake he had made. The humans were not weak pacifists. They were a species that had chosen peace because they were too dangerous for war. His murder of Ambassador Carter had awakened something that should have remained sleeping. He sent desperate messages offering tribute, territory, anything to stop the human advance. His crystals pulsed with terror as he realized his empire was doomed. But Stone's response was broadcast across Zaphirian space for all to hear. You killed a man whose only weapon was words. You murdered someone who came to you in peace. There is no negotiation. There is no mercy. There is only justice. The final assault on the capital world began at dawn. Human Marines landed with weapons that violated every galactic treaty. They moved through Zaphirian defenses like death itself, unstoppable and merciless. The Emperor's palace guard fought bravely but uselessly against superior technology and training. Stone personally led the assault on the Imperial Palace. He wanted to face the alien who had killed his mentor. His powered armor deflected enemy fire while his weapons cut through defenders like a scythe through wheat. Nothing could stop him from reaching the throne room. Emperor Vextar waited on his crystal throne with his 4 ceremonial swords drawn. His crystals blazed with defiant red as he prepared to die fighting. Around him lay the bodies of his personal guard who had given their lives for their emperor. The throne room floor was slick with alien blood. Stone entered the chamber and removed his helmet. He wanted Vextar to see the face of human justice. The emperor stood and raised his weapons, but knew he faced certain death. His crystals showed no fear, only the bitter satisfaction of a warrior who would die as he had lived. The final confrontation lasted only moments. Stone's advanced weapons easily defeated the Emperor's ceremonial blades. Vextar fell to his knees as his life ebbed away. With his dying breath, he spoke words that echoed through the ruined palace. Your diplomat was weak and pathetic. I regret nothing. Stone looked down at the dying Emperor and delivered the response that would become legend throughout human space. He was strong enough to offer you peace. You were too weak to accept it. The Zaphirian Empire formally surrendered within hours of their emperor's death. The surviving leadership had no choice but to accept human terms or face complete extinction. The galaxy watched in amazement as a peaceful species demonstrated the terrible cost of underestimating humanity. The rescue ship carried Lisa Morgan, Kevin Walsh, and Jake Peterson back to Earth through space that had been forever changed. Where once proud Zaphirian fleets had patrolled their territory, only wreckage and silence remained. The three survivors looked out at the destruction with mixed feelings of relief and horror. Lisa had not spoken much since her rescue. The trauma of watching Ambassador Carter die had left deep scars on her mind. She clutched the datapad containing her cultural notes about the Zaphirians, information that would help determine their future. Her hands still shook when she remembered the Emperor's blade. Kevin worked constantly on his translation computers, preparing testimony for the War Crimes Tribunal. He had recorded every conversation during their imprisonment. The Zaphirians had discussed their plans to invade human space and enslave the population. His evidence would ensure justice for Carter's murder. Jake Peterson coordinated with the rescue team to gather intelligence about Zaphirian military capabilities. Despite being held prisoner, he had observed their security procedures and weapon systems. His analysis would help shape humanity's future dealings with warrior species. On Earth, millions of people gathered for Ambassador Carter's funeral. The ceremony took place at the Diplomatic Memorial in Geneva, where the names of all peaceful envoys killed in service were carved in black stone. Carter's name would join the honored dead who had died trying to prevent wars. Admiral Rebecca Carter stood at the podium wearing her full dress uniform. Her brother's coffin was draped with the flag of the Diplomatic Corps, a white dove on blue background. She had not cried since receiving news of his death. Her grief had transformed into something harder and more permanent. She spoke to the assembled crowd about Daniel's dedication to peace. He had spent 30 years building bridges between species and preventing conflicts through patient negotiation. His death marked the end of an era of unlimited trust in diplomatic solutions. President Hayes announced the establishment of the Carter Doctrine during the funeral ceremony. From that day forward, any attack on human diplomatic personnel would be considered an act of war. The galaxy's peaceful species would be protected, but aggressors would face swift and total retribution. General Stone attended the funeral in dress uniform with his chest full of medals earned in the Zaphirian campaign. He had been offered promotion to Supreme Commander but declined. His war was over and he wanted to return to training the next generation of officers who would protect human diplomats. The ceremony concluded with the reading of Carter's final words transmitted by Kevin Walsh. The ambassador's last message had been a plea for his team to tell Earth that they had tried to make peace. Even dying, he had hoped that his sacrifice might serve some greater purpose. Meanwhile, in former Zaphirian space, the work of reconstruction began under human supervision. The warrior empire had been completely dismantled, but the civilian population needed food, medicine, and shelter. Human relief ships arrived carrying supplies and medical teams. The surviving Zaphirian leadership signed the Treaty of Submission in the ruins of their capital city. They accepted complete disarmament and agreed to pay reparations for Carter's murder. Their military was disbanded and their weapons destroyed under human oversight. Many Zaphirians struggled to understand what had happened to their mighty empire. They had been taught that strength came from conquest and violence. The idea that peaceful species could be more powerful than warriors challenged everything they believed about the universe. Some younger Zaphirians began to question their traditional culture. They studied human philosophy and tried to understand how a species could build such advanced civilization without constant warfare. These individuals would form the foundation of a new, peaceful Zaphirian society. But older Zaphirians remained bitter about their defeat. They whispered in dark corners about revenge and the restoration of their empire's glory. Human intelligence services monitored these groups carefully to prevent future violence. The galactic community reacted with shock to humanity's military demonstration. Species that had dismissed humans as harmless pacifists suddenly reevaluated their diplomatic relationships. Trade agreements were signed quickly and with much better terms for Earth. The Arcturian clans, who had previously tested human patience with border raids, immediately ceased all hostile activities. Their government issued formal apologies and offered significant trade concessions. They had no desire to discover what had happened to the Zaphirians. The Centauri Republic, long-time allies of humanity, publicly praised the Carter Doctrine. They announced increased cooperation with human diplomatic and military forces. Other peaceful species followed their example, seeking protection under humanity's umbrella. But some warrior cultures saw the Zaphirian defeat as a challenge rather than a warning. Deep in uncharted space, the Crexani Empire began preparing for their own confrontation with humanity. They believed their superior technology and tactical doctrine would succeed where the Zaphirians had failed. Director Helen Brooks of the Diplomatic Corps established new protocols for all human diplomatic missions. Every embassy and negotiation team would now include armed security personnel. The age of completely defenseless diplomats had ended with Carter's death. New diplomatic training emphasized the balance between peaceful negotiation and defensive strength. Future ambassadors would learn to project confidence backed by military power, rather than naive trust in alien goodwill. Carter's idealism had died with him. The Harmony, the ship that had carried Carter to his death, was converted into a memorial museum. Visitors could walk through the quarters where the diplomatic team had prepared for their doomed mission. The ship served as a reminder of both human idealism and its limitations. Stone established the Carter Institute at the military academy on Luna. The school would train diplomatic security officers who combined military skills with cultural knowledge. These guardians would ensure that no human envoy would ever again die helpless and alone. Lisa Morgan eventually returned to work as a cultural specialist, but focused on identifying potentially hostile species. Her traumatic experience had given her insight into the warning signs of aggressive cultures. She became humanity's expert on detecting threats before they could act. Kevin Walsh continued his linguistic work but developed new protocols for emergency communication. He created hidden transmission systems that could send warnings even if standard equipment was compromised. His innovations would protect future diplomatic teams. Jake Peterson accepted promotion to head of diplomatic security. His first-hand experience with alien imprisonment made him uniquely qualified to protect human envoys. He established training programs that prepared security teams for worst-case scenarios. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. The peaceful species that had spent centuries building beautiful cities and creating great art was also capable of devastating violence when provoked. The choice between cooperation and destruction now rested clearly with alien civilizations. Years later, when new species made first contact with humanity, they were shown recordings of the Zaphirian War. They learned about Ambassador Carter's peaceful mission and his brutal murder. They saw the terrible consequences that followed. Most chose friendship. Some chose neutrality. None chose war. The memorial to Daniel Carter stood in the center of the diplomatic quarter on Earth. Carved in white marble, it showed the ambassador with empty hands extended in peace. Below his statue, golden letters proclaimed the words that had become humanity's new creed. Peace through strength, strength through unity, unity through remembrance of those who died believing that words were stronger than weapons. The galaxy was safer because of Carter's sacrifice, but it was also more dangerous. Humanity had revealed the iron fist hidden within their velvet glove. The age of unlimited faith in diplomacy was over, replaced by a more realistic understanding of galactic politics. Ambassador Daniel Carter had died trying to prevent a war. His death had caused one instead, but that war had established a peace that would last for generations, protected by the knowledge that humanity's patience had limits and their retribution was absolute. The dove of peace still flew, but now it was guarded by eagles. The civilian ship Harmony drifted through space like a white dove among the stars. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood at the main window watching distant suns burn in the darkness. He was 52 years old with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen peace talks on dozens of worlds. His hands were soft from years of shaking hands instead of holding weapons. Carter wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's Diplomatic Corps. No medals decorated his chest because diplomats did not win battles. They prevented them. He had spent 30 years talking instead of fighting, and Earth was better for it. The galaxy was better for it. Behind him, Lisa Morgan checked her files for the 100th time. She was the cultural specialist on this mission, and she worried about every detail. Lisa had studied the Zaphirian Empire for 2 years. She knew their customs, their history, their way of thinking. What she did not know was whether they would listen. Kevin Walsh sat at the communication station practicing Zaphirian phrases. The linguistic expert was young and eager. He spoke 17 alien languages and could learn new ones in weeks. His job was to make sure nothing got lost in translation. Wars had started over misunderstood words before. Jake Peterson walked the ship's corridors checking security systems. He was the only one who had military training, but he carried no weapons. That was the rule for diplomatic missions. Weapons made aliens nervous. Weapons suggested you expected trouble. The diplomatic corps believed that if you expected peace, you were more likely to get it. The Harmony had been flying for 3 weeks to reach the Kepler 442 system. It was far from Earth and far from the main trade routes. The Zaphirian Empire had chosen this place for first contact because they trusted no one. They had good reason to be careful. Carter had read the reports about them. The Zaphirians controlled 23 star systems. Their technology was advanced but focused on war. They had conquered their neighbors and enslaved weaker species. Everything about them suggested they would be difficult to deal with, but Carter believed in diplomacy. He had negotiated peace between the Arcturian clans and the Centauri Republic. He had ended the mining disputes in the Vega sector without a single shot fired. He carried gifts of Earth's art and literature, beautiful things that showed humanity's peaceful nature. The Zaphirians had sent only basic information about themselves. They were tall with scaled skin and 4 arms. Crystals grew from their spines that glowed different colors based on their emotions. They valued strength above all else. Their society was built on military rank and combat prowess. Carter knew this would be challenging. Warrior cultures often saw diplomacy as weakness, but he had dealt with such species before. The key was to show strength through confidence, not aggression. To prove that choosing peace took more courage than choosing war, the navigation officer announced they were approaching the meeting station. Carter looked out the window and saw it hanging in orbit around a blue-green world. The station was clearly Zaphirian design with sharp angles and weapon ports. Even their peaceful installations looked ready for battle. Lisa joined him at the window. Her hands shook slightly as she held her datapad. She had never been part of First Contact before. The weight of representing all humanity pressed down on her shoulders. One mistake could doom relations between the species. Kevin checked his translation programs one final time. The Zaphirian language had complex tonal elements that could change meaning completely. He had practiced with the few audio samples they possessed, but real conversation would be different. He hoped his preparation was enough. Jake monitored the station's scans of their ship. The Zaphirians were thorough in checking for weapons. They found none because there were none to find. The Harmony carried only gifts, food, and the tools of diplomacy. Its strongest weapon was Carter's voice. The docking proceeded smoothly. Zaphirian dock workers moved efficiently around the ship. They were as tall as the reports suggested, nearly 8 feet high. Their scaled skin gleamed under the station lights, and the crystals on their backs pulsed with steady blue light. Carter recognized it as the color of calm attention. Emperor Vextar waited in the main airlock. He was larger than his subjects with deep red scales and golden crystals that marked his royal status. 4 ceremonial swords hung from his belt, 1 for each arm. His eyes were yellow and cold as they studied the humans. Carter stepped forward with empty hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. He spoke the greeting Kevin had taught him, carefully pronouncing each syllable. The Emperor listened without expression, then replied in heavily accented English. "Welcome to my domain, humans. You are small and weak-looking. I hope your words are stronger than your bodies." Carter smiled and nodded. He had expected this kind of reception. The Emperor was testing them, trying to provoke a reaction. Diplomats learned early not to take such challenges personally. They responded with patience and respect. "Your Majesty honors us with this meeting. We come in peace seeking friendship between our peoples. Earth offers trade, knowledge, and cooperation." The Emperor's crystals shifted to orange, indicating skepticism. He gestured for them to follow him deeper into the station. Zaphirian guards flanked them as they walked. The guards wore full armor and carried energy weapons. Their crystals glowed red with barely contained aggression. Lisa documented everything she saw. The station's architecture was designed to intimidate. High ceilings made visitors feel small, while weapon displays reminded them of Zaphirian military might. Art depicted great battles and conquered enemies. There were no images of peace or cooperation anywhere. Kevin listened to every conversation around them. He heard guards discussing the humans in dismissive terms. They called them soft and pathetic. Some wondered why the Emperor bothered meeting with such obviously inferior beings. Kevin kept his face neutral and said nothing. Jake noticed the security arrangements. Every corridor had multiple exit points and defensive positions. The station could become a fortress in moments. He appreciated their military efficiency, even as he hoped they would never need to use it. The delegation reached their quarters and prepared for 3 days of formal negotiations. Carter reviewed his notes one final time. Tomorrow would determine whether humanity gained a new ally or discovered a new threat. He believed in the power of words to build bridges between species. Outside their windows, Zaphirian warships patrolled the system. Their hulls bristled with weapons and their crews trained for conquest. They did not know that far away other ships watched and waited. Ships that belonged to a species they had dismissed as weak and harmless. The stage was set for first contact between two very different civilizations.